All right. Now that we've hit 6 p.m., I'm going to give folks one more minute to join. We'll start at 6:01. Please note that we are recording this session, so anyone who is unable to join us live this evening can watch the recording or you can revisit it. We will get started in just a minute with the transportation meeting number 2. All right, with that, we're going to kick things off, and I want to welcome everyone and thank you for being here this evening for the South Whitehall Township Comprehensive Plan Update Transportation Working Group Meeting number 2. We have a lot to cover this evening. We are joined by some wonderful SME subject matter experts from the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, who you will meet shortly. We do want to start off with introductions for everyone, and if anyone joins late, we can definitely have them introduce themselves as well. I'm going to start. My name is Hannah Clark. I am a senior planner with Michael Baker International. We are supporting South Whitehall Township in the facilitation of these working groups. I was here last time in the transportation meeting. It's great to see you all again. I'm very much looking forward to tonight's discussion. Greg, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Greg Adams. I'm planner for South Whitehall Township. I too was here at the last week's transportation meeting, and I'm hoping to see another good meeting tonight as well.
Thank you, Greg. And now we'll go to our Lehigh Valley Planning Commission subject matter experts. Can we start with Becky Bradley?
Hi, I'm Becky Bradley. I'm the Executive Director at the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission and the Secretary for the Lehigh Valley Transportation Study, which you'll hear more about this evening.
Thank you, Becky. And Paul Karafides, would you like to introduce yourself next?
Sure. Thanks, Anna. Again, my name is Paul Karafides. I'm with the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. I'm the new Director of Transportation Planning and Data. I'm 11 days in, so take it easy on me. Thank you.
Thank you. And Matt Assad.
Yes, I'm Matt Assad. I am the managing editor at the LVPC. I am slightly more than 11 days in, but take it easy on me anyway.
Thank you. And thank you so much for being here this evening. We know they have so much great information to share, so much immense knowledge of transportation in our region. So very quickly, I just want to go through and have our working group members introduce themselves. I'm going to go by the names I see on the participant list. So Mr. Al Tope, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm Al Tope. I'm a member of the South Whitehall Township Planning Commission.
Thank you so much. Next, I have Bill McNair.
Hi, Bill McNair, and I'm also a member of the South Whitehall Township Planning Commission.
Great. Thank you. David Burke. Mr. Burke, would you like to introduce yourself? If not, no worries at all.
I'm sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. David Burke. I live in the Deerfield section of South Whitehall Township, and I'm very interested in the transportation issues that the township faces with all of the developments and warehouses and so forth that are in planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Diane Kelly, would you like to go next?
Sure. Thank you, Hannah. I'm Diane Kelly. I am a South Whitehall Township Commissioner, and I'm also on the South Whitehall Township Planning Commission.
Thank you so much. Michael Draben-Scott.
Hey everybody, Mike Draben-Scott. I'm an Allentown resident, chair of the board of the DNL National Heritage Corridor. I'd just like to stay up to date on what's going on with trails.
Thank you so much. And finally, I have Scott Savette.
Oh, you said it right. Thank you. Scott Savette. My wife and I live in South Whitehall over by the Parkland High School in the Pheasant Hills section of the township.
Thank you so much. And that covers who I'm seeing on the participant list. Did I miss anyone? Anyone need to introduce themselves?
I'm Brian, a member of the Planning Commission for 11 years and a 51-year resident of South Whitehall Township. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. And so my apologies. I saw your name and I think I put you in a, so my apologies for that. Thank you so much for being here.
That happens a lot, so don't worry about it.
There's a lot of bees. All right, so before we jump in to the presentation, one thing we wanted to do first is, you may remember the key takeaways that we put up on the Jamboard in our last meeting. And if we can very quickly, if you wouldn't mind going on your browser or on your phone to www.menti.com and placing that in the chat as well, you'll be prompted to put in a code. You want to put in the code 46477010. It should bring you to a screen where you can go and rank the 9 key takeaways we have from last week's discussion here, and give us your thoughts on what is most important as a priority and what maybe falls a bit lower. So we can, and these have been shared previously with the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission subject matter experts. So this will be a quick exercise to understand where we're at this evening based on last week's discussion. And just in case you're having issues, if you've gone to menti.com on your browser, I just want to quickly show you, once you put in that the number, you will, this is the screen that will come up if you're on your browser, and you do have to select the option. It will highlight the option as you go down. So it's a little hard to read unless you start scrolling.
Yeah, that is a horrible user interface. I know it's not yours, but wow.
Not ours, and it's much more usable on your phone, I will say. If you go to menti.com on your phone browser, they've made it a lot easier than if you're on your computer browser. So if you can bear with the bad interface and give us your thoughts, it'd be much appreciated. I'm going to just bring up our Menti presentation. And if you are just frustrated with it, the code is 46477010. And if you don't feel like doing the Mentimeter, you can speak up, either put in the chat what your top priority is, very briefly, or unmute yourself if this is not working out for you this evening. So there we go. We have one person. So this our pioneer has put up, and it does take some time because you have to scroll through. Right now we're seeing the #1 priority as the importance of the official map and including projects in the comp planned official map to get things done. See if there's anyone else who wants to dive into the Mentimeter world. Right now we have the control of PennDOT as the bottom. Now we've moved up to ensuring we're working collaboratively with other working groups to ensure recommendations aren't conflicting. That's a very important way to ensure we're not siloing recommendations here in the comp plan process. Third pioneer, we have, again, we're seeing the importance of the official map and including projects in the comp plan official map to get things done. This was a topic of conversation and reference, as our LVPC members know, from the existing conditions data we shared last time. So we will save this and make sure I heard from Mr. Burke that #4 was his top priority. So I am assuming that's #4 is on. So it does keep changing. So my apologies, Mr. Burke, for that. If you want to write the text of your priority in the chat, we can just make sure we have that captured. So with that, I don't want to hold us up from hearing from the members of the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. I think that this collaborative work together, forming a roadmap, and the tools we have to do so are all very high priorities here. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and invite our Lehigh Valley Planning Commission subject matter experts to begin their presentation, because the purpose of tonight's meeting is to hear from them, hear about their best practices, tools, the context of regional transportation planning and how it affects municipalities. And then we will go into our discussion really thinking about where can we start applying some of these tools in South Whitehall, and then ultimately what are some of the recommendations that we'll carry forward into the comprehensive plan. So with that, I'll hand it off to Lehigh Valley Planning Commission for what I'm sure will be an incredibly interesting presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Hannah, and thank you all of the members of the South Whitehall community who have joined this working group today. Transportation is obviously near and dear to everyone because we need to get around in order to live our daily lives. And at the end of the day, planning for an efficient transportation system that can evolve and change with the challenges that come in front of a community, or in our case, a region, is critically important to your long-term economic stability and success. So Hannah asked us, and Dave and Greg asked us to kind of just give you an overview of specifically what's in the region's transportation plan and how that then ties into what you're trying to accomplish in your comprehensive plan, so you can start to think about how those two things can go together. When we work on the regional level, we're zoomed out a lot more than you are. You're zoomed in, and that's a good thing, because the Pennsylvania law for comprehensive plans, which is the same law for counties as it is for county planning agencies like LVPC, as it is for townships, boroughs, and cities, requires all of our plans to fit together like puzzle pieces and be consistent with each other. So the township is really approaching this in a very smart way. What we did recently with our adoption of the regional plan, the new regional plan in 2019, is we took our approach to transportation and changed it substantially. We really organized the region based on the form of the community or forms within the community, and came up with this idea of centers and corridors. So places that were built before the car, these tend to have a lot higher walkability, bikeability, slower traffic speeds, a lot more historic structures, and that kind of sense of place that people think of when they think of Eastern Pennsylvania. Post-war communities were built basically after World War II and tend to be almost entirely auto-oriented. This is that era that we just kind of emerged out of. It really sort of ended at the housing downturn in the early 2000s, where things were mostly oriented towards the car and not too much else, making walking, biking, transit, trail connections, other things incredibly difficult for nearly 50 years, because we didn't prioritize that form of transportation infrastructure. And then those emerging places, or areas where you start to see that re-emergence of all forms of transportation as being equal and equitable. And so we organized those things around the types of communities in the Lehigh Valley. We even came up with some corridor definitions, which we are hoping will be helpful to you as you think through what your transportation plan is going to be for your comprehensive plan, as well as how that ties into your general land use plan, your housing strategies, your economic strategy, and the like. So I'll just show you this for a minute, and you can go back to lvpc.org at any time, search Future LV, it's right on the homepage. Get right to goal 2, which is our transportation goal. And find all of this stuff there. But you start to see that you want different types of infrastructure in those different types of places. They were built with different types of infrastructure. But this is a plan that you're writing that looks forward into the future, just as much as it looks at how you manage your spaces today. And so if you want to add more pedestrian connections and connectivity, and looking at that type of place and how those forms of transportation intersect with what you have now is important. So what's the purpose of the place, and what are you trying to achieve? What sort of transportation is going through there now? Do people want to walk through there, like cross Cedar Crest Boulevard from the Salad Works to get to the Target? Why, yes, they do. Is that hard? Why, yes, it is. So, you know, in some of those key places where you have a lot of activity, then kind of retrofitting is probably the simplest way to look at it, or planning for how those places evolve becomes very important. You get the idea. So I want to show you a really cool interactive map that we actually have that really was the primary foundation of this transportation plan. So again, you can find this right from our goal 2 for future LV. Click on the thing that says interactive map, and it takes you to a really cool tool that we developed that will allow you to window in on different things and actually create a custom analysis of place. So it pops up with the region as a whole. You can just use your mouse wheel to scroll right on into South Whitehall over here. And you always want to start with fact-based optimism. You have real facts and you know that you have an optimistic approach to solving the goals, the issues that you have today, as well as planning for the future, then you really are setting yourself up for success. So we zoomed in here on South Whitehall, and it's not going to totally fit in the screen, but it'll show you enough to get the idea here. You can go to this little layer cake of squares and click on that. And that allows you to look at a variety of things. So I'm going to go ahead and turn everything off except the municipal boundary and the Lehigh Valley boundary. And then those centers are those types of places that might be more historic, might be built during the Carr era or emerging, are noted as little dots. So that shows up there. There are some regionally significant ones. Those are the blue dots for South Whitehall in the screen. If you zoom in, and if I was, let's say, your local planner, I might also want to look at those places. And this is a really nice map because it shows you the building footprints for the township. So you can see where things are organized. You have a lot more suburban development here. You've got some crossroads of villages here at Goothville. You might want to make that a historic center of local importance, and how does that get connected then into other places? So you can really kind of zoom in and out to use this as a custom analysis tool. Then you can put on your corridors. And again, these are regionally significant corridors. You're going to have probably more specific ones for your township, and that's absolutely okay. You going through that exercise and thinking through that is going to be really helpful to us when it comes to working on projects together and what the potential of that is. One of my favorite layers in here is commuter trails, and we have the Jordan Creek Greenway. We noticed that that was a priority from the meeting that you had recently. And you can actually see how the Greenway connects from basically near-ish the Trexler Nature Preserve and goes all the way and through into Allentown. A significant portion of that is built. We have this designated as an off-road commuter corridor in the regional plan, meaning this is a regional priority of mobility and transportation. We think of the trail system as a transportation system. We don't just think of it as a recreation system. And there's a whole host of reasons for that. We would definitely encourage you to do the same, especially as people try to live more healthy and active lifestyles, and especially because your trail networks are often lower cost, quicker, more quickly achievable ways to give people transportation options where they don't exist today. Other key components are where your bus routes are. These would make excellent places to designate more higher order corridors within your community. We all know about Levan's Road, and you really want to kind of connect these between your jobs and your housing centers, and showing where your Lanta lines are and where your stops are really gets at population and employment density, which is absolutely foundational to a transportation plan. Congested corridors and high crash corridors. High crash is obvious. And I just want to throw some numbers at you because this is very important part of the conversation. Just between 2006 and 2010, so a little bit ago, South Whitehall Township had over 2,311 crashes and then had 48 fatalities or major injuries. So that's some of the newer information we have on that, and we're in the process of updating that regionally. But that's quite a bit for one community. That could be driver behavior issues. It could be geometry of roads. It could be lack of pedestrian connections where pedestrians want to go. It could be a variety of things. It lets you know that there are specific issues that need to be planned for and addressed. I'm going to flip it over here to Paul to talk to you a little bit about congested corridors, because we know we had a question from the last session that was posed to us.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Becky. If you could zoom out so we could see the corridors within South Whitehall. As you can see, obviously—
Sorry, a little too far.
No, I don't have to explain it. This is more for me not knowing the region, but you all know what the congested corridors are. But a deeper understanding of what a congested corridor is, I think, is very important. You know, it is a defined process, you know, that it comes from PennDOT and USDOT on how to come to the conclusion for these congested corridors. And as Becky stated earlier, we're looking at these from a regional point of view. So these are the major congested corridors for the region. And for the comp plan and for South Whitehall, you have to then go dive deeper in to your local roadways and create a new systemized plan to create the congested corridors within South Whitehall that are not these regional significant corridors. And that then you can, from there, you can start, you know, considering strategies and how to combat those congested corridors as you zoom in to the local level of the roadway network.
And one of the key points here is you have a lot of business and a lot of residential in the township. You're a very attractive township for people to want to live and or work in. And as a result of that, you're experiencing immense growth pressure. That growth pressure is only going to increase. More people, more stuff. That's the bottom line. And anybody who tells you otherwise is not telling you the truth. If you have more people, they need more things, which means then more need to address issues in the transportation system. It means more need for transit. It means more needs for sidewalks and trailways, or what we call commuter corridors. It means more schools, sewer, water infrastructure, other things. Because Pennsylvania is a right to develop state, you have some limits on how you can manage that growth. Then I'm going to just show you one more. You obviously know where your interchanges are. We also created this handy dandy multimodal accessibility buffer. And you're thinking, well, what does that mean? Multimodal means more than one mode of travel. So walking, biking, driving, even freight. So within a quarter mile of any corridor in the Lehigh Valley at the regional scale, we buffered it. Why? Because that's where people are going to want to go. As a result of that, you have to plan for more. Why? Because it's got more accessibility already for a variety of types of modes, a lot more population and or employment density. And as a result, people are going to want to develop there. Here at 309 and 22, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. You had a lot of activity proposed all around this interchange as a result of it being very accessible. I'm actually shocked that it's taken this long for people to start to propose things there, but it gives you an idea of where you need to be thinking about your land use and how your land use could change or might change, and where you want to direct growth, where you actually have the best accessibility of the transportation system, usually with some refinements and working back and forth with the development community to make that happen. Why another quarter mile? Well, because a quarter mile is a walking distance. And so your pedestrians, your cyclists, and your vehicles can easily get So one other thing too is everybody knows that we're a two-part organization. The second hat that I wear, along with Paul and along with Matt, is through our second board, which is a federally designated metropolitan planning organization. It is very innocuously named board called the Lehigh Valley Transportation Study. Sounds like a college class, right? Well, it is not. It is a very powerful entity, completely again separate from the Bi-County Planning Commission of the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission under a totally separate law that actually plans for the region's transportation system and then has a portfolio of investments that's currently valued around $4.3 billion. I was asked by South Whitehall Township to talk to you about how to get projects on that transportation improvement program or funding cycle, and then also asked what projects are currently on what everyone calls the TIP. So you can go to lvpc.org. We just put everything under that. You can go to download the document for the Transportation Improvement Program. It's updated every 2 years and it's a 4-year plan. In order to get into the funding cycle, which is this 4-year cycle, you have to be in Future LV, which is our long-range transportation plan, joined with our Bi-County Comprehensive Plan. That gets updated every 4 years. So we'll start that update next year for an adoption in 2023, early 2024. So you are timing your comp plan at a perfect time, because right now you're prioritizing what you want your transportation investments to be. You're working with us to figure out how that can work into the regional system. And as a result of that, as we update our long range plan, then it'll make it very easy for us to then consider the needs of the township. And you can, again, look at all of this stuff on the LVPC website. It isn't just a giant pot of money. The 4-year budget is $451 million. The federal government has these buckets, and they limit what how much money is in each bucket, and then what you can spend it on. So you cannot move money from pedestrian facilities and safe routes to school to roadway expansion. You cannot move roadway expansion funds to the bridge budget. So again, federal law written by Congress, not the president, by Congress, dictates that. And currently, the federal government is renegotiating the transportation law that then sets the policy and the funding strategy. So we're not entirely sure what that's going to mean coming out into the fall when it's likely to be adopted, but we can tell you what we have now. Currently, there's over $27 million programmed for the replacement and upgrade of the Tillman Street at Route 309 interchange. That is one of the region's top 3 highest priority current projects. There's another $900,000 for traffic management technology upgrades along Mock Chunk, and another $3.4 million allocated in other parts of the township as well, or on 22, excuse me, for some resurfacing of 22. The federal transportation program is designed to do that, take care of things that are high priority for the greatest number of people. So the chances of the Lehigh Valley Transportation Study funding a small project at an intersection at Cedar Crest Boulevard and insert name of cross street there is not likely. That's because federal policy just works that way. So again, figuring out what your priorities are, where they are, why you want them to happen is going to be critically important to the decision making that you'll need to do as part of your comprehensive plan update. Again, it's so wise that you're doing this in partnership with the community as a whole, but also bringing us in so we get a better understanding of what you need. So as then we go into the update of our work, that'll help you be more successful in getting your projects listed. Thank you.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, does that wrap up the presentation portion of LVPC? Yep. Great. So we wanted to set aside a few minutes before jumping into our discussion questions and revisiting the Jamboard, which we all now know and love, to have you ask any clarifying questions of the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission subject matter experts on what they presented or specific information that you would like to know more about. And then we'll jump into the discussion in about 10 minutes. So this is an opportunity to speak up, drop in the chat, unmute yourself. We are entering in our conversation portion of tonight's meeting. And really thank you so much to Becky, Paul, and Matt for that wonderful presentation and sharing so many great resources in such a short amount of time. We've linked them, a lot of them in the chat here. So please go on ahead and ask questions. If you want to drop your name in the chat, we can call on you or unmute yourself and speak up. We're a small group. I imagine there has to be some. Okay, Phil, please go ahead.
Question on the vision for regional transportation, either, I'll assume it's not rail right now, but bus transportation regional is how do you see that, and when do you see that happening? Is it something along Route 22 or 78 that's going to carry from east to west, or do you see anything happening there?
Oh yeah, we actually have, and we're vesting in it now, in a federally approved plan for what they call enhanced bus rapid transit, which is a precursor to light rail. It's the only thing we qualify for is a region under federal law. And Atlanta obviously is at the head of that. That route actually goes from roughly the Walmart in Whitehall Township down to Tillman Street, across into Bethlehem, and then over into Easton as a first route. Eventually, it will move west along Hamilton, they think. Again, you know, it's based on a whole host of metrics that have to be updated from time to time on a cycle. But essentially, phase one of the enhanced bus rapid transit system is higher frequency, fewer stop locations. Atlanta is constantly working with us as well to do reroutings. We just did another rerouting that began July 1 as well. So as job centers and population centers grow and shift, because remember, we're adding between 4,000 and 6,000 new residents into the region sustained for the last 60 years. So that's roughly equivalent to another city of Allentown, another city of Easton, and a city and a half of Bethlehem worth of people at a largely suburban scale in a lifetime. And it's only sped up during the pandemic, and it's led to, you know, housing shortages and other things, which is why your township is getting so much growth and development pressure. That won't stop anytime soon. So constantly refining the transportation system is important. The other important thing is every transit rider starts as a pedestrian or a person in a wheelchair. They may come to transit on a bike as well, but if you do not have pedestrian facilities and ADA facilities and bike facilities, you will never be able to support transit. So that's another reason to create those connections between your on-road and off-road system through commuter trails, as well as your sidewalk systems and other things.
Thank you for that. Oh, thank you. I do believe Phil Forensic, and my apologies for last name pronunciation. Would you like to ask a question? You'll just have to unmute yourself, I believe.
Where does the widening of 22 fit in the plan?
Oh, okay. So forever burned in my brain, July 16th, 2018. The widening of 22 was planned out over a 20-year time horizon, as you may know, and phase one began to be implemented with the replacement of the 3 bridges that made up the Lehigh River 22 crossing. In fact, one of the sections of that bridge was about to collapse, and so that work had to be done. And then the Fullerton Avenue interchange came. We were actually planning on the widening full out to the 78 merge. And then the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation was required by the US Department of Transportation to invest more money in the interstate highway system. Route 22 is not an interstate highway. In fact, the only interstate highway we have is 78. As a result of that, and because the Pennsylvania legislature was not able to come up with additional funding sources for PennDOT to maintain the interstates to the standard that was required, they grabbed back nearly 30% of our entire budget for the next 20 years. That happened in a period of 5 minutes on July 16th, 2018. As a result of that, we were required to pause the Route 22 project because we no longer had funding for it. Again, I'm not sure what the timeline for the restart of that may be, but I would expect that you would not see anything for at least a decade and potentially 2. Unless something substantially changes at the federal level and the state level with transportation funding.
There was something mentioned in one of the other meetings that it might be possible to make 22 a what do they call it, the offshoot of interstate, so like a 476 kind of offshoot. Is that a possibility in order to get to the interstate system?
No. Don't shoot the messenger. We've had very robust conversations with the United States Department of Transportation. And so, you know, we'll be working on some things that will move us closer to that, but it can't just happen like that.
So
because an interstate has to cross into another state and the other state has to agree. New Jersey does not agree.
Oh, well, then that's a problem.
It's a big problem. But Paul's here now. He's used to dealing with Pennsylvania and New Jersey, coming up from the Philly Metropolitan Planning Organization that actually worked in both states. So it's one of the reasons why Paul's here. So I'm going to give him a cape in advance.
We'll see what we can do.
We're going to keep working that problem because you actually do have a very good and logical thought process there.
Thank you. And I'm going to highlight, we got 2 questions in the chat from Diane Kelly. Her first question is the PennDOT project you mentioned on Montauk Road located in South Whitehall?
Yes, it is.
And then
you can look at the map on our website.
And then Diane's second question was, what are the percentages of people who utilize Lanta in South Whitehall and the region?
We could talk to Lanta and get that information for you as a follow-up.
Great. We'll note that as a next step from this meeting. Diane, does that work for you?
That's perfect. Thank you.
Great. Are there any other follow-up or clarifying questions from working group members for Lehigh Valley Planning Commission? Greg, any thoughts from South Whitehall? As staff-wise.
No, that was a good presentation.
Wonderful. Well, I don't want to delay our jump into Jamboard. So I am going to invite everyone, and if you are part of last week's meeting, which I think most of you were, you received the, you participated in the Jamboard and are hopefully somewhat familiar with its capabilities. So I just, oh, my apologies, it just sent the wrong link. Let me just resend that. I'm now putting into the chat the link that will allow you to access the Jamboard. I'm going to share my screen so you can see my Jamboard on here. And what we are hoping to do is utilize this space again as a way for us to facilitate our discussion this evening and to get ideas up here and to have a space for us to share and collaborate and obviously get the feedback and expertise from Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. So again, just to show you, if you are participating on the Jamboard, we're mainly using the sticky note icon. And when you go all the way to the left of your screen, count down 1, 2, 3, 4, click on the sticky note, and that's how you can put in any idea you would like. When you hit save, it puts the sticky note up on the screen, and then you can keep posting as many as you would like in terms of your responses. So with that, if there are any questions, please speak up or put it in the chat. If you decided you don't want to use the Jamboard tonight, feel free to speak up or put your comments in the chat, and we will try our best to ensure that we can capture those on your behalf. So right now, I really want to welcome folks to answer this first question, and it's a broad one. It's what is working well in terms of transportation in South Whitehall Township. Great, so we have our first one, public works maintenance and weather response of local roads, very important. Please, you can feel free to add as many ideas as you would like. And I think, one of the ways this helps us understand, like last week we discussed what are the existing conditions data we've heard from the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission on how we evaluate and how the region thinks about transportation. And sometimes you don't always think we go to the pain points rather than what's working well, but I think it's, it's helpful for us. And please, we'd love to hear your thoughts from LVPC and South Whitehall staff as to how does it help us to understand what's working well in the township, especially when it comes to transportation or items related to transportation, like what someone just added, the park system, which we know promotes connectivity. And again, feel free to, if you would like, drop your comments in the chat or unmute yourself and we'll capture it there too. And if you've added something, we have multiple post-its about what has been built and what is being planned and what has been implemented along the Jordan Creek Greenway. So that I think was a very effective, when you showed us the transportation map, how important that regional connection is across almost the entirety of the township, including sidewalks and new development of plans. And again, I invite folks to feel free to unmute yourself and expand upon any of your comments, and also invite Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, Becky, Paul, or Matt to give us some of your thoughts as to what you're seeing up here on the Jamboard.
Well, one thing I notice is that it's very much in line with what we found on a Lehigh Valley wide basis. We took a survey, a regional survey, and when we asked people what they liked most about the Lehigh Valley, the things you're seeing on this board were exactly what they said. They said trail system, the parks and recreation, open space. It was the absolute #1 thing.
I think that's really interesting that this is bringing it in at that, at the municipal scale context that we're seeing that carrying forward. Would anyone want to add their thoughts on what Matt brought up? We also heard about the importance of the official map. So, and if someone who added that in would like to expand upon that, we reviewed the official map. There's 3 versions or 3 different perspectives of it that were adopted in 2010 as a result of the 2009 comp plan. If you'd like to talk about what may be working from that, what could be improved, We'll head into that in the next few questions. But if you'd like to expand on the official map comment, please feel free, or thoughts from our subject matter expert.
That official map is everything because it comes out of this comprehensive plan. So it takes the policy and then it implements it geospatially, right? So it says where you're planning for growth is just as much as where you aren't. And it also allows you to put things in like the Jordan Creek Greenway, which is a brilliant linear park that ties into the DNL trail. And I know Mike Dravenstadt is on, and he's the chair of the DNL, and their work on it's just been phenomenal. And the work of all the partners coming together from the township to Wildlands Conservancy and us and the county. And I mean, that is a labor of love, but it also has so much power. And your official map allows you to say where you want those things to go, and really reinforce the importance of them and plan ahead. And they can also become the basis of figuring out what sort of transportation impact fee ordinance that you may want to consider adopting, which I think, if I could give you one piece of advice, you must take the time to develop a transportation impact fee ordinance. I know it's time consumptive, and it's very technical, but it's the only way that you're going to be able to leverage money out of development into the improvement of the transportation system because of the limits of state and federal dollars and the township's ability to tax.
Thank you for that, Becky. And I think that will definitely be something to discuss more as we start angling towards recommendations. And for folks who may have missed the intro to the Jamboard, if you want to post a sticky note, go to the tool in the left-hand side of the Jamboard. We've linked the Jamboard. I'll put it again so you can access it in the chat. And the sticky notes are the fourth tool down. So right here in the middle, sticky note. Great. So we also heard, we have heard a bit about sidewalks and not deferring or waiving sidewalks. Also talking about where the official map has been used, and Eck Road and Brickyard Road, at least as a potential tool. Thinking about multimodalism, which we've heard a lot about. Mr. Hirsch, I'll add that in for you. The Covered Bridge Park improvements are great, and that's gotten, I think, a lot of interest because of how wonderful the park and how many functions it provides. We know it's also providing great riparian habitat and things like that. I'm just going to quickly look. I think Al Tope said improve walkability, so I'm going to add that in there. And I'll move us along to the second question, unless anyone would like to add in additional thoughts, or we'd like to hear any other feedback from our working group members or subject matter experts.
Just one quick thought before we move on. Looking quickly at all these sticky notes, I think the one common theme is creating connections. Your multimodal, the sidewalks, improved walkability, the trail. It's really about creating those connections. I know transit was brought up earlier. You can't just have transit on a standalone island. You need to create those connections for people to be able to get the transit, to get from transit to their destination. It's really about creating those connections and having a plan to really move those connections forward as you move forward into the future.
Thank you for that, Paul. And I think that's really important as we advance into our next set of questions. And I wanted just some of the discussion around infrastructure, electric charge superchargers. I am curious if that is what's in the Tillman Square parking lot, because I was at dinner at Red Robin's and I saw many, many Teslas coming, and it was like a parade. So I was assuming it was a supercharger, and that is great to know. So, and if someone would like to add their thoughts to that, please feel free. So advancing us to the next discussion question, and sometimes this, our mind goes to this space immediately, but I think it's really helpful that we started with some of the areas that have seen improvement and are working well, or, lay the groundwork for a lot of, positive work in the future. Let's think about where this can be policy-wise, geographically wise. We had Becky and Paul and Matt talk through some of the ways the region is seeing pain points. So how is that playing out in South Whitehall? And I don't know, Becky, here, if this would be a good, the need for something, what you were saying about the impact fee, or if you want to repeat that, and if that would go here, if we maybe want to consider that more under recommendations. And then obviously working group members should provide their feedback.
Well, you have an official map, right? And that's important. You're updating the comp plan, which is important. If you don't have that enforceability piece of it, which is through your impact fees, you're never going to get the implementation to the degree that you want it to be. It is your only legal path to do so. So I think it's more of a recommendation, but if anybody ever wants to talk about, some people call it Section 209 because that's the act in which it falls under the MPC, but I believe it's actually Section 5 of the MPC, 5A, Municipal Capital Improvement, where that's embedded at. We're more than happy to at the commission to talk to you about what that could mean. But again, it gives you teeth where you don't have them now and helps relieve the burden on the taxpayers who ultimately are going to be paying for a lot of this new infrastructure without that sort of fee in place. They are a pain together.
And I thank you for that, Becky. I know I don't believe one of our working group members who was here last time is on tonight's meeting, but he was speaking and emphasizing the importance of Act 209 and pursuing work under the act and getting those types of policies in place. So I know that is something that has come up in our discussion from last week. So we're seeing, I'm just going to add from Al, the need to improve street lighting. And we also are seeing lack of township road improvement plan to keep up with growth, lack of sidewalk infrastructure, critical gaps. And I know LVPC can speak a bit to some of the tools and ways you're thinking about that in planning, lack of modern bus stops, limited capacity of feeder roads and corridors that currently aren't able to handle traffic and are not potentially suited for the expected plan development, not enough north-south connections to the township. Anything you're seeing there from the LVPC perspective, or Greg, if you want to chime in from South Whitehall, that in regards to some of these problem areas.
Matt, did you want to give a quick shout out to the LTAP Tech Assist program?
Sure. I mean, that is a program that is available to any community to sort of help with many of these issues. Tech Assist is it's offered by PennDOT for free, and it's there to sort of help you with intersections, to help you with pedestrian crossings, to help you with signaling. And what they do is they send an engineer, and an LVPC staff usually also comes, and they sort of go right into the field with you at your intersection or your pedestrian crossing. And I think North Catasauqua, they went all the way through the neighborhood, and they sort of analyzed and saw what was being done right and what could be done better. And it was an amazing, really resource that they do, and they do it for free because they think they're going to get the best bang for their buck. If they can get pedestrian issues and connectivity issues and really just make the streets safer for communities, it's worth it to send an engineer and an LVPC staffer. And I attended one in Allentown, and you would think Allentown has everything right because they have their own engineers, but there are so many variables at every intersection, so many different things and choices you can make, and they identified a bunch of things. I think Brian was on that one, and a week after they did their tech assist, they sent a 20-page analysis of their recommendations. It was pretty amazing, and you're sort of getting free engineering and LVPC staff expertise, and it really can make your community a lot safer and a little more connective. And I think Becky has said she's sort of proud of the Lehigh Valley because the Lehigh Valley takes advantage of this like no other region in the state.
Yeah, I think that's a great resource to dive into, and also I think to repeat as we go into thinking about the recommendations. And some of the other pieces that have just come up here as we've been talking about or getting feedback. One working group member mentioned the lack of political consensus in the township, which can sometimes cause delays in getting things done. We're seeing some lack of road improvement plans and repair of things like potholes that can obviously affect usability of the roads. There's also this larger question of vision and not being reactionary rather than being proactive. And I think that's a lot of what we're working through in these meetings is to how to create that vision, how to set these recommendations. Understanding traffic impact fees, we need to understand those more to fully understand the options before the comp plan is complete. So maybe some additional looking into the Act 209. So sorry, I just was running through a lot of this. You guys have any thoughts, or anyone of the working group members want to expand upon your feedback here?
What sort of occurs to me when you talk about the vision, and earlier we talked about the centers and corridors, and we kind of spoke about it in the context of transportation, but with Future LV, it was kind of like the seed that sort of grew a tree of Future LV, because very early on we sort of decided that all development, or most development, would be directed to along the centers and corridors, and sort of preserving the areas outside of that. And that kind of speaks to all of the priorities being listed on this board right now. You know, the connectivity and the sort of creating density within certain places, but then preserving other places for trails and for open space and for natural resources. And so while centers and corridors was sort of a transportation theme, it really became like that nugget that grew really the primary policy of Future LV.
That's incredibly helpful, I think, in the understanding the larger picture. So I do want to move us forward so we have time to give as much great thought that is here and move it into how we start to address some of these concerns and identified problem areas. I know we did not get to talk about every posted up here, but if there's something you feel you want to touch on before we advance to the next question, please feel free to briefly unmute yourself and speak up, or put it in the chat. As you know, you can always come back to this question and add more thoughts, and we also will talk about the Google form. But I think the importance of planning and the importance of understanding what tools there are to think about how transportation can be addressed. And I guess I'm going to move us forward if that's all right with everyone, unless I hear a dissent. So this is utilizing some of what we've heard about this evening from the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. What are some of the tools that were mentioned? And we can, think through those best practices that are relevant to addressing some of the problems or challenges that were in the previous slide and that you were mentioned in the previous question. So we're seeing traffic impact fees, What tools and best practices are resonating with you? What would you like to learn more about? All right, 2 votes there. And so please feel free to drop your ideas in. I think we're everything from road maintenance, capacity, congestion, to really that vision, and how does some of what we talked about address that vision and planning for the future. So here we got an idea: update the official map with more detail to create a vision. And I do invite, again, this is definitely an opportunity for discussion and to hear what our subject matter experts are thinking about, maybe some suggestions, and we've heard from some of them already. But if you have other ideas, other opportunities you see for South Whitehall. So there's a suggestion of having the LVPC speak to elected officials and getting in sync with the regional vision, the local vision, understanding available infrastructure capacity. So tech assess could be a very tangible way to begin addressing, and should definitely carry that forward into the recommendation portion.
I think also just understanding the vast amount of data that is available out there to assist in all this, and you need to understand what's out there right now. And I think we also, another thing that's sometimes difficult to kind of wrap your head around is everyone speaks on congestion and the issues with congestion. Congestion isn't going to disappear, and it's not always a bad thing. I think we have to understand that it's about managing the congestion, what we can do and how we can maybe drive it to go to other modes, whether it's walking, bicycle, transit, or just this understanding of how we can manage it. Are traffic signals being optimized on a regular basis to control our corridors? It's really managing, not removing congestion, because that's, as we can see, it's not going to happen. It's being able to use what we have on the road already, to the most efficient and safe manner.
Thank you so much for that, Paul. I'm just trying to capture it to the best of my ability. Live typing, not the easiest thing. So the need to participate in LVTS funding. We can hear a bit more from LVPC, and maybe Greg can also speak to some of the ways the township staff is working in these areas. I don't know if there's any kind of quick just feedback on that piece about the participation from the township.
So the township has been very good about attending LVTS meetings and putting in projects when George Kinney was with the township. And I just hope that can continue, because as we do open calls for projects that get you into the long range transportation plan, that's going to be really important for the township to be at the table then, but also, throughout this process and in other ways. I did want to let folks know too that I found out this afternoon that I'm an expert witness to the city of Bethlehem, and that soon to be Mayor Willie Reynolds is going to be calling me into the meeting. So as soon as he calls me, I will have to temporarily drop out of this, but then I will come back, assuming it doesn't take too long. But you do have experts with Matt and Paul. So thank you. I'll stay in as long as I can.
Thank you for letting us know, Becky. And I think we've already generated a lot of great discussion. With that in mind, are there other items people would like to add to what tools and best practices have been discussed? Or any final thoughts, or not final, but just additional thoughts here before we move to, I think this is the meat of today's discussion, and we can refer back to some of the previous slides, but what do we want to really consider carrying forward into the comp plan recommendations? And this will, identifying some of these ideas tonight will be the focus of our third meeting when we build them out and we say, what's the timeline? Who is the champion? Where is the funding coming from? And these are the recommendations that will form the basis for the comp plan update. So this is our initial opportunity to brainstorm on that. So yes, so feel free to put up any and all ideas from what we discussed, or also something that maybe didn't get discussed and you wanna throw it up there. I'm gonna add the LTAP program. Sorry about that. We're seeing a serious look at the Act 209 study. Great, I think that's really, that has been emphasized from both last meeting and today. Traffic impact fees, dense growth must include infrastructure impact. And please, Paul and Matt, in terms of your subject matter expertise, if you're seeing things here, maybe there's a question to ask to get a little more information, it's always helpful. Just some thoughts you might want to throw up here as well.
Well, you mentioned the LTAP program, and we talked about the Tech Assist, but LTAP also free. There's also free best practices classes that they give. Currently, they're online, but before the pandemic, they were actually in person at the LVPC. But online, they still work pretty well, and there's still interaction with the instructor. But they are everything that communities face, from line painting to placing signals to how to handle a construction zone, and again, they're all free. You can send your public works there, or even your paid staff in all of the departments. It's a good resource.
No, my apologies for getting those confused.
Well, no, they're on the same program, so they weren't confused.
Okay.
Tech Assist and LTAP they're both out of the LTAP program, but they're both really good resources.
No, I guess just to build on a suggestion that has made its way up here about becoming subject matter experts ourselves. I think that's also an opportunity for the LTAP program, right? Just to really engage with that type of training and know what's out there. And I did a full day or a day and a half or a half day of pedestrian and multimodal improvements when I was a city planner with Allentown, and it was really useful. You're getting real actionable information. So
and it's free.
And it's free, yes. A few things are coming up here that I think we could maybe hear a bit more from our subject matter experts and staff, and then working group members can add in. So something that came up here, discuss multi-municipal planning and how it would benefit the township. So I know we obviously, I'm sure the group here knows LVPC is involved in supporting that work, and so maybe you can speak a bit about that, and if anyone wants to add their questions, please do. So Matt or Paul, could you take us down a kind of some discussion around that?
Well, I can discuss a little bit multi-municipal planning, and I think we have over 30 communities right now developing multi-municipal plans. And what it does is it helps you to work together with your neighbors, and you can sort of decide on some things that you can find efficiencies and common ground with, and you can share, you can share resources, but you can sort of write up a plan, because roads and land use, it doesn't stop at any border. It kind of goes across, and it helps to sort of have a plan and sort of work with your neighbors. And one of the big things that enables you to do is it's the only type of plan that you can, the way Pennsylvania law is right now, you have to have a space for every type of zoning. Everyone has to have a space for warehouses, and everyone has to have a space for certain industrial, and you have to have everything in every municipality. But if you're in a multi-municipal plan, you can actually choose which municipality that fits best, and not every municipality has to have those uses. So if you see a space that, warehouses make sense here, but they don't make sense over here, every municipality doesn't have to shoulder that burden. And that's kind of a big benefit of it, given what has been occurring, across the Lehigh Valley.
Now, I agree with Matt. I think that's the biggest piece with the multi-municipal planning. It's being able to kind of spread out those land uses. It's like the chicken or the eggs, land use or transportation first. What do you do? Which one goes where? So you have to understand, if you're able to spread it out, you can solve a lot of problems. If you're not having to jam, industrial and warehouses all in certain areas within a small municipality. When you can grow that to 4 or 5 municipalities, you now have, it's a greater advantage to be able to kind of spread that traffic around now. And, you can create your land uses and then base your transportation off a wider area, which,
yes,
quote unquote, makes it a little easier.
That's sort of the glitzy benefit, but there's also the benefit of just sharing resources. And, I think every municipality, they all have, lots of them have mutual aid agreements and that type of thing. This kind of takes it to another level. You can actually share maintenance if you want. It's particularly useful to smaller municipalities. If you can share maintenance, you can share trucks, you can, rent equipment. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to be had by sort of getting those efficiencies.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We in the township, of course, we've had a lot of informal agreements with the surrounding municipalities for emergency services, police protection, fire, and the like. We actually dipped our toes in the water with a multi-municipal open space parks and recreation plan about 10 years ago. So that was the start. I know it can be scary sometimes for municipalities to get together because you're talking about competing interests, what we want, what they want, always different levels of service. But it's something that if you have good political will to do it, it can reap some pretty good benefits. So I encourage that sort of thing wherever possible.
And it's important to understand that you don't really give up your autonomy. I mean, you sort of work together, but you remain your own, you remain your own municipality and make your own decisions. There are just certain things that almost by contract you decide to do with your neighbors.
That is very incredibly helpful. Would the working group member who put that up there, is there any additional follow-up questions or clarifications around multi-municipal planning?
Hi, it was me, Diane Kelly. No, very good description. I appreciate the comparison to the municipal aid that we have in other areas. And I thought it was a great point to say for planning as well, something we certainly can look at. Greg, I thought your point about being scared, it's certainly something that we all need to consider because we are giving up a little bit of our authority or we're the driver in our comp plan. And if you go into multi-municipal, you're sharing that. It is scary, but there could be great benefits that we could reap from it. And I, for one, would love to see some more information on that as we move forward to know what our options are. Knowledge is power. The more we know of what's available, the better, the more tools that we can bring into this plan to really get a good vision to move forward.
Definitely. Thank you for that, Diana. And I think that's really what these sessions are about, and building that basis of knowledge. So as we go into our third meeting and we say, just build this out and see what it could look like, to consider it being included as, you know, the Planning Commission looks at all the recommendations and makes those decisions, and the Board of Commissioners. So we know this is the foundation, or the, you know, fodder for the update that is this great collective brainstorm. Something I wanted to ask the group, if it would be helpful, is Becky talked about the tip, and she talked about the process for the tip, which we know, she said the timing of this update is good. Could maybe Matt or Paul or Greg, if you want to add in, how does what we include in the comp plan help us, give us a strong basis for what the tip, what could be prioritized, and also maybe linking in the official map there too, if that is an additional tool.
First sign in anything is having it written down somewhere that this is what you want to happen. If with any project, you need to be able to point back to a plan and say, hey, here it is. It's an agreed upon item and we want it to move forward. So I think just having those, the official map, the vision, creating that gives you something to then point back to in the future when planning comes up for those types of projects.
Thank you. Yes, and oh, please, I don't know if someone wanted to expand upon that. Please go ahead. Nope.
No.
Well,
other than what what you set in your comprehensive plan is really just the policy. You don't tend to set projects, but it sets the policy for what your projects will be. You know?
And then you can move forward with the official map and actually put down some of those projects, and that gives some teeth to it.
Yeah, I think that's a really helpful, and I'm sure, you know, we have so many knowledgeable folks on the call. Folks are aware of that, but it's just those connections and what tools we can use to create an actionable, implementable plan that will move these things forward. Other aspects we have see more frequent updates to the comp plan as an opportunity here to consider in terms of the comprehensive plan update. More transportation connections. I think it was David Burke who asked us to include one of the recommendations from the 2009 comp plan, amend the township zoning map so the traffic related intensity of permitted uses is appropriate to the capabilities of the existing and planned road network. So a lot of different directions there, but are we, in terms of from our LVPC folks, or, you know, best practices you've seen in other communities across the Lehigh Valley? I know that was a topic of conversation in our first meeting about how does, you know, South Whitehall compare? How are there, not that you're always comparing yourself to others, but what can we learn or what can we leverage from our neighbors?
Well, I noticed the one here that said, you know, updating the comprehensive plan more often. I mean, we ourselves are doing that. It was once every 10-year exercise, and now we're doing it every 4 years. So it sort of corresponds with the changes in transportation. And, you know, sort of going back to that Tech Assist program, the one thing I noticed while they were in Allentown, it was clear that what worked only a few years ago at this intersection, this was a very busy intersection within 2 blocks of 3 schools, 3 elementary schools. What worked just a few years ago doesn't work now. So I think it's pretty astute to talk about, you know, updating the comprehensive plan more often than 10 years. And you don't have to update the whole thing, but it's worthwhile sort of giving it a refresh.
That's really helpful, Matt. Any thoughts about that from working group members? Want to expand upon some of your thoughts in that space? More frequent updates? Greg, as a planning staff member, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a good idea. I think, as was mentioned, you don't have to redo the entire process. I think you need to perhaps just review what still works and what doesn't. Or otherwise, I think you get into this process of constant change, and you may not get things done simply because you're constantly changing what your priorities are. Doing a refresh is probably the best way to do it. Of course, like everything else here, it's going to take resources. We want to do a lot here. And, you know, I love the bit about get with the money people, but eventually the money people are going to be us. So we have to, you know, be careful of what we do and plan well. So everything takes money. And, you know, obviously, if you're doing a comp plan every 5 years, you might need a little more staff to do that. That's great. Boy, I'd welcome the company. But you know that we're competing for funds and resources just like everyone else. So just got to keep that all in mind.
Thank you for those insights. Other thoughts on that piece from any of the working group members? Because I will say, particularly this more frequent updates has come up across multiple working groups. When we think about that priority of being coordinated with recommendations in other working groups, that is, I think, an opportunity to explore how it functions across the many topics of a comprehensive plan, because it's been reflected in transportation. We heard about it last night in community facilities and resource protection. I think every time, I think in every session I've been in, and I've been in 4 of the 5 of last week, we heard the emphasis on thinking about a shorter timeline for updates to reflect so many of the dynamic aspects. So I think the last question I had to bring to the group about what's up here, and please others jump in, but this discussion around connections, the broader encourage more transportation connections where feasible, and then also this bus transit improvements to enhance ridership and mitigate congestion. I think I'm seeing maybe a line between those, not necessarily saying that that's what other folks are seeing, but I guess in terms of our folks from LVPC, do you have thoughts on this piece in terms of connectivity? I know, Paul, you were saying that was kind of a takeaway for you. And so when we come to recommendations, is there anything you would suggest throwing up here?
No, I think you're right on track with these items go hand in hand. You know, bus improvements, transportation connections. As I stated before, you can't have one or the other. You don't want these sitting on islands by themselves. You know, you need to create these connections, understand, and I think this kind of goes back to the what we were just talking about. You know, updating the comprehensive plan. I think there's got to be a separation of updating of the comprehension plan and the ultimate vision. You can't keep changing the vision and the comprehensive plan at the same time. I think you have to create a coordinated vision for the future, and then the comprehensive plan can be new policies to get to that vision, not necessarily, I think Greg alluded to, you can't keep changing constantly because you'll never get anything accomplished, you know? So you need to have these end goals and be it connections, you know, whatever it may be, but you can't continuously change those points that you're trying to get to. You know, you can change the policies, the way you get to those, but I think we need to continue to encourage that vision, and then, you know, create the comprehensive plan around that vision and then update that. But these connections are what's important. I mean, really, what are we trying to do? We're trying to connect people with places. And how do we do that best? It's honestly, I come from, you know, again, I said I was here 11 days. I come from the Philadelphia region. We have zero space to build anything down there. There's nowhere to build a new road. There's nowhere to do anything. So we really have to, you know, look at what's already out there and how do we really use that efficiently? Because by using what we have out there efficiently, it drives costs down. The cost between, you know, building a new road and enhancing something are vastly different. So I really think, you know, it's the fancy word, you know, transportation systems management and operation, TISB, you know, is the new buzzword. Is how do we use what we have already to the best possible way we can, and really it's making those connections. You're not going to drive people off the road. You know, you're not going to be able to cars aren't going to suddenly disappear. But if we can incrementally make things, you know, more palatable to walk, or take a bus, or ride your bike and take the bus. We need to make these connections and people in place. People are trying to get to shopping. People are trying to get to their place of business. We need to figure out ways to make that easy, because people like easy. And, if your route doesn't have a sidewalk, you're probably not going to walk. But if it does, you might walk. You'll say, you know what, it's only a quarter mile. I can walk this. I don't have to get in my car and drive it. So, it's really, incorporating the vision and really trying to connect. I try to keep things simple, connect people with places, and how to do that efficiently.
To sort of circle back on that same theme, the better connectivity based on multimodalism is really the future. Companies, employees, and residents are demanding it like never before, and that was only accelerated by the pandemic. So as Becky said, you guys are doing this at a good time.
I think those are good thoughts for us to, I think, incorporate into the discussion and how we move it forward. I do just recently, one of the working group members added create a transportation improvement plan for the township roads and trails. So seeing those links between the two. And then we just got create and implement a capital improvements plan. So I don't know if that was same person or two separate. If anyone who added those wants to speak briefly to what's driving that recommendation. I mean, I think it's clear we're making a lot of these connections. Do you want to expand on that at all? Yeah, go ahead.
I can only take credit for the capital improvements plan. It's something I don't believe we've ever had here. And if you develop the vision and have a plan that shows the points of where you're going to, it seems to me that the obvious thing is a capital improvements plan to help you get there, so you can plan for your expenditures over an extended period of time to get you to where you want to go. And it's something that we just haven't had here, and I think it would be invaluable to us.
And certainly when the next call for projects comes out for the next tip, it certainly will be helpful to have a defined list of things that you think need done.
Very true. Something I know we're honing in on 7:30, but something I know, Paul, you had some information around this. Someone was asking about identify safety areas and high crash areas to address, and you spoke to that briefly. I don't know if you want to expand on that at all based on this feedback.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, obviously, identifying safety areas is extremely important. We don't want anyone, being hurt, killed, seriously injured on our roadways. On top of that, that just crash areas, create more congestion on our routes. The more crash you have, the more stop, the more queuing you have. So I think, as we spoke earlier, there's a lot of data out there, and crash data is something there is a lot of. So it's creating a process of looking at the crash data, understanding what it is, creating your own list of safety areas that you really want to focus on, and then implementing the various strategies that are associated with that. We're actually going to be, come this fall, starting to update our traffic safety plan for the LVPC. So that's in the works at our level. So anything you can add from your level is just something we can connect with going into the future. So safety aspects are extremely important for the road network.
Thank you for that. And Paul, if you have any links immediately available, or maybe could follow up with any resources for crash and safety data, that would be great. Does someone want to speak up? And we also just got the idea, a dedicated bank account, impact fees to match funds from state and federal projects, which we know matching is a huge, huge aspect, especially at our thank you so much for that, Paul, at the municipal level when we're going after DCD, DCNR, so the Community Economic Development, Department of Conservation Natural Resources, and PennDOT, obviously, and all the work there. So I am seeing we're almost at 7:30 and you guys have given so much of your time. Our working group members, thank you so much for coming to another week of meetings to move us forward. A huge thank you to Lehigh Valley Planning Commission. Please extend our thanks to Becky. I know she did have to go and give her expert testimony. But Paul and Matt, thank you really, truly for spending this time with us. We have recorded this session, so we have everything in historical records. So you can go back and go if there's anything you want to review. So just for working group members very quickly, we're not meeting next week. We are meeting the following week. That will be our last topic-based meeting together. That's where we will have the opportunity to build out some of these recommendations. And just a quick update, this will go out in the reminder that comes out tomorrow or on Thursday, that we're actually moving the transportation meeting. It was originally scheduled for, I believe it was Wednesday, August 4th, and we're moving it to Tuesday, August 3rd from 6 to 7:30 p.m. virtually, given the overlap with the Board of Commissioners meeting on the 4th. So we will send an update on that. And you can always feel free to get in touch with myself with any questions. Obviously, Greg and Dave are your staff resources. And I just want to extend a thank you again to Lehigh Valley Planning Commission and to all of you here this evening for giving it more of your time and your insights to this process. So thank you so much. And
before you sign off, I just had one question. You just mentioned that the meeting would be on the 3rd of August. It is a conflict with a major event in the township that is National Night Out for the Police.
Okay.
And from 5 to 8 p.m. that evening, there will be a large gathering of residents, staff, police down at the Covered Bridge Park. So I don't know if you're aware of that or if that is something that can be adjusted, but I know that that is an event that will draw an awful lot of staff and residents too.
Of course, thank you for that. And I did not come up in our initial discussion today, just with some initial identification. I will work with Dave and Greg to review, and thank you for that, because we obviously don't want to conflict with major events as well as all the major meetings that are going on. So thank you so much for that, Diane.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much for a great meeting this evening, and have a wonderful rest of your night.
Great. Thank you for having us.
Good night, everybody. Thank you very much.
Thank
So long.
Oops,